Welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, joined here by attorneys Brad Micklin and Jessica Ramirez. We're breaking down the biggest legal trials and live stories, and we have a lot to talk about, so let's keep going. Our focus, though, right now is going to be on one of our main topics of the day. This is the only place we're going to be live today. It's out in California, and it's the case of David and Louise Turpin. You might remember that these California parents were accused of torturing and holding captive, most of their 13 children. They pled guilty back on February to 14 felony counts, including 1 count of torture, 1 count of dependent abuse, as well as multiple counts of false imprisonment, child endangerment, and adult abuse. Today is their sentencing at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. As soon as it starts, we're going to make sure that you don't miss any moment of it. They could face 25 years to life in prison. So you're not going to want to miss any moment of that. Now, one of the things we have in anticipation of the Turpin courtroom is we have this 911 phone call that's pretty chilling. Watch.
I've never been out. I don't go out much, so I don't know anything about the streets or anything. Okay, I live in a family of 15 people, and my parents are abusing. They abuse us. And my 2 little sisters right now are chained up. There's 13 kids, and then a mother and father.
And how many of your siblings are tied up?
2 of my sisters, 1 of my brothers.
How are they tied up, with rope or with what?
With chains. They're chained up to their bed.
Do you think anybody in the house will need to go to the hospital?
I'm not sure. Sometimes we live in stilts, and sometimes I wake up and I can't breathe because how dirty the house is.
When was the last time you had a bath?
I don't know, almost a year ago. But sometimes I feel so dirty. I wash my face and I wash my hair.
Are you homeschooled?
No, we don't do school. Our mother tells people we're homeschool. Our mother tells people we're private schools, and she has a fake private school set up. But we don't really do school. I haven't finished first grade, and I'm 17.
Wow, that is awful. Jessica, what can we expect today?
Well, today they're going to have the sentencing hearing. I'm sure that the defense is going to have their mitigating factors where they can present to the judge, where they're going to present why the sentencing should be less harsh, right?
Like, who would they call?
I don't think that they're going to be able to call anyone. I think that the only thing that they could possibly present is maybe they should have some type of rehabilitative type of sentencing. But I mean, these are really harsh and horrible facts. I don't know anybody that's going to be sympathetic to their plight or story, but they do have an opportunity to present as to why the term and their sentence should be less harsh. And of course, the prosecution is then going to present why it should be harsh.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to be live in that courtroom, and we're not going to want to miss any moment of this. I've never seen a trial like this, and I'll tell you what, right now, I hope I never see a case like this ever again. But let's switch gears and talk about another major trial that we have been covering here on the Law and Crime Network. It's dark today, but we have a lot to recap. It's the trial of Charles Merritt. Right, Jessica, let me ask you this. So the defense is not buying this motive put forward by the prosecution. On one hand, they said, why kill the hand that feeds you? Another point of it is, you're going to kill an entire family for such a seemingly small amount of money. I mean, killing a whole family is awful, but this whole idea, the motive doesn't make sense. Does it make sense to you?
It doesn't. And, you know, the defense, all they have to raise is a little tiny bit of reasonable doubt, right? And that's it. I mean, a whole family, and it seems like what he said, he needed him more than he needed him. So why would he do this? Why would he kill? And it's so sadistic. I mean, they killed these little children. They were hit with a blunt force, and it doesn't make any sense to me.
All right, Jessica, you heard the prosecution's case, or part of the prosecution's case. What do you make of it?
I think that he does have a motive. Again, it's just correlating the motive of him being a bad guy and taking money from him and stealing money from the company to brutally committing these deaths. It just doesn't make any sense.
But access and opportunity as well.
Yeah, and it's very the motive is there. It's just correlating what happened is very difficult. But I think the motive is important because it has to make sense to the jury. It has to make sense that this person did this for a reason, not just brutally kill these children. I go back to the children because that's so horrific.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Gianni and Joseph Jr. Obviously a very emotional case for the family of Joseph McStay. I mean, and we're talking about something that they disappeared back in 2010, and we're in a trial right now in 2019. But, Jessica, what I want to ask you now is trying to get some answers to this. Where do you think this family was killed? Do you think they were killed in the house, or do you think they were killed in the desert? Because the evidence can be split either way.
I think they weren't killed in the house because there would have been some type of evidence left behind, some type of DNA. The house was so clean. I mean, there was nothing found in the house, and they had so many years to investigate, right? I mean, this happened in 2010. So to me, I think that they were killed in the desert.
Yeah, there was a question of whether or not that was blood spatter on the kitchen, the table, and I think there was a question, and then there was a question of whether or not whoever did this cleaned everything up. But if that happened, does that change your opinion about who did this? Does it make it more or less likely that Charles Merritt is the one who did it?
No, I don't. It doesn't change my opinion. I think that he probably could have gotten somebody else to do it, not himself. So whether
You think somebody else is involved?
I mean, there was 4 people that were murdered, so I don't know if one person can do the murders and have a man, right? That he has his children. A man is going to protect his wife, his kids. So it's probably somebody else.
But if you're saying that there's multiple people, is that reasonable doubt if we don't have a clear understanding of who really did this?
And that's all we need, one little tiny spot of reasonable doubt.
I guess I want to know, where do you think this trial is going to be going as we enter into day 43? But there's at least things that are suspicious, like the idea that it could have been his car outside of the home on the night in question, the idea of the cell phone evidence tying him to the desert. We're going to talk more about this, but when we come back, we're going to hear the testimony of Dr. Alexis Gray, who's a forensic anthropologist that can really break down what happened with those remains. We'll be back in a minute. Wow, just absolutely chilling. And Jessica, you know, the details of this case are bizarre. At one point, it was thought that the family was on their way to Mexico. And it was interesting because their car was found near that border. There was surveillance footage of what appeared to be, you see right there, the family, it was determined it wasn't them. But what do you think was going on here? I mean, what do you think, like, how do you think they wound up in the Mojave Desert, of all places?
Well, somebody obviously took them there and murdered them, and they were very sadistic. And this anthropologist that's testifying, and she's going to be pulling at our heartstrings, right? She's going to be showing what happened and the circumstances of the bodies, but they're not going to help the jury figure out whether this was done by the defendant, right? This is just a person that's going to be there to testify as to the brutality, to pull at the heartstrings, but she's not going to help the defense or the prosecution.
There's also something about the idea that the bodies were found in the desert because it shows a clear attempt to hide them. And that's the thing. I mean, their bodies weren't discovered for 3.5 years until John Bluth, who was this biker, was driving around, and he testified and explained what happened. Daniel Kavanaugh. Now, this is the man who the defense is saying should have been looked at a lot more thoroughly. This is another business associate of Joseph McStay. Jessica, what do you make of him as an alternative suspect, given the fact we just heard in open court that there's a lot of evidence pointing to the fact he was in Hawaii at the time this happened? I mean, if you look at his PayPal records, he was doing business out in Hawaii.
Again, I think it points to a motive, that he has a motive, but that he wasn't here, he wasn't there, he wasn't around the area. It may point that he hired somebody else to do this. Again, it raises reasonable doubt, but there's no evidence tying anybody, really, except for the cell phone pings. To me, that's probably the most not circumstantial evidence, because he was there, he was close, but everything else is sort of circumstantial evidence. I mean, the motive is there, but it's a weak motive to kill a whole family and children. Again, the expert the person that was testifying that saw the bone, again, it's not helping the jury or the defense to pinpoint who really did this.
Well, how much does the defense, Jessica, have to point a finger at somebody else? In the sense, it's a weird position to be the defense attorney. You don't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, but as long as you sprinkle it, I mean, how does it work?
Well, as long as you raise reasonable doubt, right? A little bit of reasonable doubt, because that's when you do your closing. I mean, you can't have one scintilla of a reasonable doubt. Otherwise, you have to say that the person's not guilty.
Well, you hope at least. You hope that's the way the jury goes. We're going to take a break. When we come back, a lot more to discuss in the Charles Merritt case. We'll be right back. Jessica, this case, I mean, they disappeared back in 2010. We're in 2019. How does that affect trial? How does that affect witnesses?
Yeah, again, it doesn't make for a strong prosecutorial case because it's been so long. Why did it take so long for the detectives to hone in on this one person? They had this person all along, so why did it take so long, again, to bring charges? So I think it is going to be very difficult, for sure.
Brad, do you think the defense has an argument here, which they've been continuing to argue, that the prosecution had a narrow focus, that they didn't look at the evidence the right way? They immediately zeroed in on Charles Merritt. There's a lot of red flags, things that were ignored. There's arguments on both sides. I wonder, once it ultimately goes to the jury, is this going to be a close call? Do you
think so.
Yeah?
Because it wasn't that immediate either, right? I mean,
Right.
it's been so many, 2010, it's been so many years.
Right.
So yeah, they did hone in on him, they did investigate him, they did interview him, but still, they didn't have enough so many years.